My name is Jilliana Chacon, and I am reviewing Killing the Witches by Bill O'Reilly and Matthew Dugard. The main theme of this book is how the effects of the Salem witch trials are still happening even now, and many events relate to the trials. The author recalls events of multiple points in history that he tries to tie back to the trials. Yes, Bill O'Reilly does talk about the events of the Salem witch trials and what happened after, but within these descriptions of events, he draws a common line of using religion to justify action and persecution of a common enemy. A connection made by the author is that between the witch trials and a modern cancel culture, both of which could ruin someone's life because of an accusation with no real evidence, or even connecting the witch trials to the creation of the hit movie The Exorcist. The book mainly takes place in period 2 of AP US history, aka 1607 to 1754, as well as a bit of period 3, which is year 1754 to 1800. The witch trials themselves took place in Salem, Massachusetts from 1692 to 1693, falling under period 2. But this book describes use of religion among founding fathers falling into period 3, and even events that relate to the trials as recent as 2017 and present times falling under period 9. Bill O'Reilly is a political commentator with a bachelor's in history and a master's in broadcasting journalism, meaning he does have a background in history and writing. But with the fact he used to be a political commentator, that leads me to believe that there might be political agendas behind his writings, even if not intentional. In this book, though it is just a sentence or two, the author does connect the story to that of cancel culture. The author has had past experience with being canceled for sexual assault, according to his biography by Botanica, so it would make sense to connect this book about unreasonable suspicion to a situation where he believes he was wrongly convicted by the media. He did in fact deny any wrongdoing in this case, but this means his bias could shape the views of the events because his mind will connect it to personal experience. Other than that, there are not many blatant biases in this book. Though author Bill O'Reilly has multiple different popular history books in the Killing series, these books are known to be somewhat inaccurate. One of the other books in the series, Killing Lincoln, is not sold at Ford's Theater, the assassination place of Lincoln, because it was deemed unfactual by the National Park Service. A Ford's Theater Society does control part of the theater and believe that the book should be sold so that visitors can judge the book for themselves, but many still believe it to be inaccurate. A Washington Post article states that historian Edward Steers Jr. cites several instances where the book strays from documented history. He then asks, if the author made mistakes in names, places, and events, what else did he get wrong? How can the reader rely on anything that appears in Killing Lincoln? End quote. A New York Times article about O'Reilly's book Killing Reagan, the violent assault that changed a presidency, George P. Schultz, who served as Reagan's Secretary of State, says, I could go on at length over what Killing Reagan leaves out in order to make this historically inaccurate point, end quote. If the author is using false information in one of his books, what's to say that all of his books have errors? This book also does not have a works cited, meaning there is no source for the evidence nor a way to know where he got his information. Even with this, the book is likely directed at people who are seeking to learn more about the witch trials, or simply just fans of Bill O'Reilly and or the Killing series. The book is about witch trials, so of course the book will attract the audience of people who want to learn more about this historical event. Bill O'Reilly and the Killing series itself also have fans, so naturally there will be people who want to read all of the books. Personally, I think this book was well written and told in a way that kept my attention. However, I picked up this book because I wanted to learn more about the events of the Salem witch trials. And that was only the very beginning of the book. Though it does cover the events in the trials, a large part of the book talks about the founding fathers. One could argue it's connecting the events to a larger historical event, but that should not make up most of the book. Rather than reading a book about the witch trials, I felt like I was reading a book about the effects of religion. In my opinion, I would not recommend this book to someone who wants to learn more about the trials. After reading multiple reviews, I concluded that many share my sentiment and have similar complaints. Inverted Gentleman Reviews says, "What does this have to do with witches?" A more accurate subtitle for Killing the Witches would be The Legacy of Salem, or some such thing, as the writers spend much of the time on purported repercussion of the witch craze as they do on the craze itself, end quote. Which is similar to my reaction. In another similar review, reader Beth Maroney wrote, "Only the first few chapters discuss the events that occurred in Salem. The subsequent chapters can be divided into 2 other historical periods," end quote, and then goes on to describe the 2 other periods as that of the Founding Fathers and that of the production of the movie The Exorcist. I do agree with the general conclusion made by O'Reilly in that the witch trials have connections to many other events and even media now. Religion will always lead people's beliefs completely, and they'll follow it blindly. And there is so much media, like movies, surrounding Salem and the witch trials. Overall, this was not a terrible book in terms of entertainment, but it would not be the best source for reliable information on the witch trials. My final thought on this book: do not read this book if you are wanting more dependable information about the events of the Salem witch trials. But if you're looking for an entertaining story, you should read it.